ruthless biker humiliated a wheelchair-bound veteran over a simple misunderstanding. But he had no clue that Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson was just around the corner, listening to everything. Cold air stung Henry Parker's hands as he wheeled himself down the quiet residential street. At 74, the Vietnam War veteran had faced battles far worse than this morning's errand, but ALS had turned even a short trip into a test of endurance. His withered hands gripped the wheels of his chair, pushing forward through the crisp autumn air, the scent of fallen leaves filling his lungs. Wrapped in a thick leather jacket, Henry muttered his daily mantra under his breath, one day at a time. The loss of his wife, his diagnosis, life had changed so much, but he refused to give in. The gas station was in sight now. Almost there. The swing doors loomed ahead, a challenge most people never thought twice about. As Henry reached out with a trembling hand, the door resisted. He exhaled sharply, putting more effort into the push. "Come on now," he whispered to himself. With a final shove, the door gave way, and Henry maneuvered inside. The familiar cool air of the convenience store washed over him. He took a moment to catch his breath, then rolled toward the pharmacy aisle. "Morning, Mr. Parker," called out Tom, the young cashier who had come to recognize him over time. "Morning, Tom," Henry replied, offering a nod filled with quiet gratitude. His eyes scanned the shelves until he found what he was looking for, his anti-inflammatory ointment. It was a necessity. Without it, even the simplest movements became agony. Reaching up with a shaky arm, he grasped the small tube and placed it in his lap. Just holding it felt like a small victory. At the register, Tom rang up the medication. "That'll be $5, Mr. Parker." Henry's heart sank. He patted his pockets, realization dawning. His wallet was at home. "Ah, lucky me and my aging memory," he said with a chuckle, though embarrassment tinged his voice. He dug through his jacket and pants pockets, hoping to scrape together enough change. To his relief, he managed to collect exactly $5 in coins. He placed them on the counter, along with his veteran ID. "Don't forget your veteran discount, Mr. Parker," Tom reminded him with a smile. The discount knocked the total down to $4, leaving Henry with an extra $1. He glanced at the coffee machine, the rich aroma of freshly brewed coffee filling the air. "Well, I think I'll treat myself," Henry mused. "A little coffee will make the trip home a whole lot better." As Tom prepared the coffee, Henry engaged in light conversation, his warmth shining through despite the weight on his shoulders. "You know, Tom," he said, his voice carrying the weight of solitude, "I'm grateful this store is just down the road. Being able to will myself here, it makes a big difference when you're living alone." Tom nodded, focused on his task, but Henry didn't mind. He was used to being met with silence. "It's not easy, managing on my own with ALS," Henry continued, his tone matter of fact. "But I make do. This little store, it's a blessing." Tom handed him the steaming cup. "Here you go, Mr. Parker." Henry accepted it with genuine gratitude. "Thank you, son." Little did he know, outside that very gas station, an encounter was about to unfold, one that would test a man's character and reveal a hero in disguise. Because someone else had just arrived. And that someone was Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. He thought he could bully a helpless old man, but then Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson stepped in. Henry Parker took a careful sip of his hot coffee, exhaling as the warmth spread through him. "You have no idea how much I appreciate this little bit of normalcy in my day," he muttered to himself. Balancing the cup in one hand, he wheeled himself toward the exit. It wasn't much, a simple trip to the store, a cup of coffee, but it reminded him that he could still find joy in the small things. As he reached for the heavy swing door, carefully maneuvering his wheelchair, fate took a cruel turn. From the side, a biker appeared, coffee in hand. Neither saw the other in time. Collision. Both cups went flying. Hot liquid splattered across Henry's lap and the tile floor, seeping into his trousers. "Ah!" Henry gasped, grabbing for his handkerchief, his skin stinging from the heat. Disoriented, he tried to steady himself, his mind racing to process what had just happened. "Please watch where you're going," Henry said, his voice strained but steady. "I was just trying to push the door." Before he could fully register the man in front of him, a voice cut through the air, sharp, angry, and filled with something far worse than frustration. "What the hell is wrong with you?" Henry looked up. A towering, muscular biker stood over him, face twisted with rage. "You should watch where you're going. Can't you just push the damn door or step aside so people can pass? Are you blind, or is that just too much to expect from people like you?" The words hit Henry like a punch to the gut. A sinking feeling spread through his chest. "I'm so sorry," he began, keeping his voice calm despite the pain and humiliation. "It was an accident. I didn't mean." The biker wasn't listening. "Didn't mean to," the man interrupted, his tone dripping with mockery. "Well, your accident just cost me my coffee. So guess what, old man? You're gonna pay for that." Henry's stomach tightened. "I don't have any more money on me," he explained carefully. "I spent my last dollar on my own coffee." The biker's eyes narrowed. He adjusted his black leather vest, making sure Henry saw the gang emblem stitched on the back. "You expect me to believe that?" he barked, stepping closer. From the counter, Tom, the cashier, finally noticed the commotion. "Everything okay over there?" he called, concern creeping into his voice. Several customers turned, whispering among themselves. A mother shielded her child's eyes. Two teenagers exchanged uneasy glances. "Hey, man, take it easy," a bystander chimed in. But the biker ignored them. Determined to avoid a bigger scene, he grabbed the handles of Henry's wheelchair and shoved him toward the exit. "Wait," Henry protested, his voice strained, but the biker's brute force overpowered him. Out of sight from the growing crowd, the biker wheeled Henry around to the side of the building, where the morning air felt colder, sharper. His voice dropped to a dangerous growl. "Listen here, Grandpa. I want my $3.50 for that coffee, and I want it now. Show me your wallet. Empty your pockets." Henry's hands trembled as he tried to reason with him. "Please," he pleaded, his voice steady but desperate. "I'm telling you the truth. I forgot my wallet. I only had enough for my medication and my coffee." The biker's face darkened. "Then I'll strip you naked if I have to," he snarled, grabbing Henry's jacket and yanking him upward from his wheelchair. "No, stop." Henry gasped, his dignity unraveling as much as his strength. "I'm a veteran. I served this country. Please, show some respect." But the biker wasn't listening. His hands ransacked Henry's pockets, ignoring the older man's weak struggles. The scrape of Henry's wheelchair against the concrete, the raw sound of his desperate protests, it was a scene of pure cruelty. Then, a voice. Deep. Commanding. "Hey. What's going on here?" The biker froze. Henry's breath caught in his throat. Emerging from the store's entrance, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson strode forward, his imposing frame cutting through the tension like a knife. His expression was unreadable, except for the fire in his eyes. "Is there a problem here?" His voice was calm, but the authority in it made the biker's bravado waver. Recognition dawned on the biker's face. His grip on Henry's jacket loosened. Still, he tried to keep his tough act. "This doesn't concern you, Dwayne Johnson," he muttered. But the fight in his voice had already started to fade. And The Rock was just getting started. The biker thought he got away, but he had no idea The Rock wasn't done yet. Dwayne Johnson's expression remained firm as he stared the biker down. "When I see someone assaulting an elderly man, it becomes my concern." His tone left no room for argument. His eyes flicked to the biker's vest, reading the name embroidered on the back. "Rick. That's your name, right?" The biker stiffened. He had been hostile, aggressive, but now he was starting to realize exactly who he was dealing with. Outmatched. Outnumbered. His expression twisted with rage. "Don't you dare mention my name," he spat. And then, as if needing one final act of defiance, he lashed out, kicking the wheel of Henry's wheelchair with spiteful force. "You'll pay for this, old man," he snarled before stomping off toward his bike. The engine roared to life. A cloud of dust kicked up as he sped away, leaving behind the lingering stench of exhaust and an unease that settled deep in Henry's gut. Silence followed, the weight of the moment heavy in the air. Dwayne turned to Henry, his expression softening. "Are you all right, sir?" Henry took a breath, still shaken but relieved. "Yeah, just a little burn from the coffee. Thank you for stepping in." He looked up, the adrenaline wearing off. "My name's Henry. Henry Parker." Dwayne nodded. "Nice to meet you, Henry." With a careful touch, Dwayne helped readjust Henry's jacket, his gaze falling to the coffee stains on both the older man's clothes and the small medication box beside him. Henry dismissed it with a wave of his hand. "It's just a box." But Dwayne wasn't convinced. "Wait here." His tone was soft but firm. Without another word, he turned back toward the store. A moment later, he returned, carrying a fresh cup of coffee and a small tube of burn ointment. "Here," he said, handing Henry the coffee before carefully applying the cooling gel to the burns on his hands. His touch was gentle, his expression filled with genuine concern. "Make sure to put some on your lap when you get home." Henry took a sip, the warmth of the coffee and the kindness behind it settling something deep within him. He looked up at Dwayne, a flicker of realization crossing his face. "Wait a second. I know you. You're the Rock, aren't you?" Dwayne chuckled. "Guilty as charged. The boxer. The actor. My wife and I," Henry's voice softened, a bittersweet nostalgia creeping in. "We were huge fans. We watched all your fights together." Dwayne listened intently, his usual superstar persona giving way to something quieter, more heartfelt. "After I came back from Vietnam, those matches helped me cope with the stress. They gave me something to look forward to." Dwayne nodded, clearly moved. "That means a lot to me, Henry. Truly. Even after my wife passed," Henry continued, "I still watched all your movies. It felt like keeping a part of our tradition alive." A small smile pulled at Dwayne's lips. "Well, you've got another one coming next year. We're filming it right now, actually." Henry chuckled. "I'll remember this day when I watch it." Dwayne's expression turned sincere. "No, Henry, the honor is mine. To serve a veteran like you, that's what real honor is about." Then, after a pause, "Can I give you a ride home? It's the least I can do." Henry hesitated, then shook his head. "I appreciate it, but if it's all the same to you, I'd like to enjoy the fresh air. The coffee will taste even better on the way home." Dwayne nodded in understanding. "Of course. Take care, sir. And thank you for your service." Henry wheeled himself forward but turned back one last time. "Thank you, Dwayne. For everything." With a final wave, he started the half-mile journey home, the warmth of the coffee a comforting reminder of the unexpected kindness he had encountered. But just as he reached the crosswalk, a chill ran down his spine. His hands gripped his wheels tighter. The biker hadn't truly left. Rick's motorcycle sat parked at the roadside near the intersection, his presence a lingering threat. Henry's heartbeat quickened. The half-mile journey suddenly felt much longer. He considered his options. The main road was safer, more crowded, but also longer, more exposed. Then, he remembered. The shortcut. A dirt path that cut through a secluded area. He rarely used it, but he knew it well. After a moment's hesitation, he made his decision. Avoiding the biker's gaze, Henry wheeled toward the dirt path. The trail wound through the trees, bushes lining both sides. The quiet, at first, felt reassuring. Birds chirped in the distance. The wind rustled the leaves. The earlier tension began to fade. Maybe, just maybe, It was over. Or so he thought. Because in the shadows, unseen, Rick was watching. And this wasn't over yet. He stole from the wrong man, and now The Rock was back to finish what he started. This wasn't such a bad idea after all, Henry murmured, taking another sip of coffee as he wheeled himself down the dirt path. Maybe I should have taken this way more often. The warm drink, the quiet surroundings, it was a balm to his frayed nerves. For the first time since the confrontation at the gas station, he allowed himself to relax. The moment didn't last. The air shattered with the unmistakable roar of a motorcycle engine. Henry's heart leapt into his throat. The sound was all too familiar. That same aggressive rev, the same hostility in the throttle. Rick! Henry barely had time to react before the biker came charging down the narrow path toward him. He swerved at the last second, forcing Henry to jerk his wheelchair aside. His coffee slipped from his grasp, crashing to the ground. The impact nearly tipped his wheelchair over. Well, a cold voice sneered. Look who we have here. Rick circled Henry like a predator, the rumble of his engine a menacing undertone to his voice. Thought you could hide from me, old man? Henry's hands gripped his wheelchair armrests, knuckles turning white. He forced his voice to remain steady. Please, I don't want any trouble. What do you want from me? Rick let out a cruel laugh, shaking his head. Too late for that. He revved the bike, kicking up dust. This is such a quiet road, isn't it? He mused, his tone dripping with malice. No one's here to save you this time. His gaze dropped to the spilled coffee on the dirt. And what a liar you are, old man. He sneered, watching the soil absorb the dark liquid. You said you had no money, yet you got yourself a fresh cup of coffee. Guess it didn't do you much good, huh? Henry swallowed hard, trying to reason with him. The coffee was a gift. From Mr. Johnson. I told you, I don't have any more money. Rick's lip curled. Oh, so you're buddies with the big movie star now? Let me tell you something. His eyes darkened. I'm dangerous. And you embarrassed me back there. Time to teach you a lesson. Before Henry could respond, Rick hit the throttle. The motorcycle shot forward in a tight circle around Henry, kicking up dirt and gravel. Let's see what a little dust does to those old eyes. The cloud of dirt stung Henry's skin, burned his eyes. He coughed, his vision blurring as he tried to wipe the grit away. And in that moment of weakness, Rick struck. A rough hand grabbed Henry's wrist, squeezing hard. What's this? Rick sneered. Henry followed the biker's gaze, straight to his wedding ring. His heart slammed against his ribs. No, please, Henry begged, his voice cracking. That ring, it's my wife's. It's all I have left of her. Rick ignored him. His fingers wrapped around the band, tugging once. Maybe this will cover the cost of my coffee. And then some. Henry's breath hitched. Please, don't do this. Her name was Clara. She. Rick yanked hard. The ring tore from Henry's finger. Pain flared in Henry's hand, but it was nothing compared to the agony in his chest. He stared at his bare finger, a pale indentation the only proof that the ring had ever been there. His eyes burned, not from the dust, but from the overwhelming grief. And then, a car engine. Both Henry and Rick turned as a black SUV rolled onto the dirt path. The driver's door swung open, and out stepped Dwayne, The Rock Johnson. His face was a mask of controlled fury. He strode toward them, his voice cutting through the air like a blade. I knew this would happen when I saw you still lingering on the roadside. Rick's cocky grin faltered, but he wasn't backing down just yet. He twirled Henry's ring between his fingers, mocking Dwayne with a smirk. Well, if it isn't the big movie star again. He scoffed. What, you think your fame gives you the right to interfere? Dwayne took another step forward. His voice was calm, steady. but dangerous. This isn't about fame. His eyes locked onto Rick's. This is about doing what's right. That ring doesn't belong to you. Rick scoffed, tossing the ring in the air and catching it. Finders keepers, he taunted. What are you gonna do about it? Dwayne exhaled slowly. Then, he took another step forward. And Rick finally realized he had just made the biggest mistake of his life. He thought he had the Rock outnumbered, but he was about to learn a hard lesson. Rick smirked as he tossed the wedding ring into the air, his fingers ready to catch it again. But he never got the chance. Lightning fast, Dwayne lunged forward. In one fluid motion, he snatched the ring right out of the biker's grasp. The movement was so quick, so effortless, that Rick barely registered what had happened before Dwayne turned and placed the ring gently back into Henry's trembling hands. Here you go, sir, Dwayne said softly. I believe this belongs to you. Henry stared down at the ring, his weathered fingers closing around it as his eyes filled with tears. Thank you, he whispered, clutching it to his chest. Thank you so much. For a moment, it seemed like the ordeal was over. But then, Rick took a step back, a dangerous glint flashing in his eyes. Instead of fleeing, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a cell phone. You think you've won? He sneered. Well, let's see how tough you are when you're outnumbered. He pressed the phone to his ear. Hey, Bear. It's me. Get the boys and meet me at the dirt path off Main Street. We've got a situation here. As he hung up, a smug grin stretched across his face. My backup's on the way, he announced, cracking his knuckles. Let's see how the boxer handles a real fight. Dwayne's expression remained unreadable, but Henry could feel the tension rising. The peaceful resolution they had hoped for was slipping away. The dirt path, once a quiet shortcut, now felt like a trap. Dwayne took a deep breath, his mind racing. There was still a chance to defuse this. Look, he said, reaching into his pocket and pulling out his wallet. This doesn't have to end badly. He extracted several crisp bills, holding them out to Rick. You want money for your spilled coffee? Here's enough, and then some. Take this, go buy yourself the best coffee in town, and let's end this nonsense. Rick's eyes flickered to the money, hesitation crossing his face. For a moment, it seemed like he might take the offer. But then, his expression hardened. He spat on the ground. You think you can buy me off? He snarled. I don't want your money. I want his, and more. This isn't about coffee anymore. It's about respect. Dwayne exhaled through his nose, pocketing the money. I tried, he murmured, turning to Henry. I appreciate it, son, Henry said, his face etched with worry. But I fear we're in for more trouble. And as if on cue, the distant roar of engines filled the air. The sound grew louder. Closer. Within moments, a gang of motorcycles emerged from around the bend, engines growling like a pack of wolves closing in on their prey. 1, 2, 5, 7. They rolled to a stop, surrounding them in a tight semicircle, effectively cutting off any escape. Dwayne and Henry were boxed in. The riders dismounted, all of them built like fighters, their eyes hard, their posture aggressive. The tension reached a breaking point. And then, something unexpected happened. A massive figure stepped forward from the pack. Bigger than the rest. Broader. Meaner. Scarier. His jacket bore the name Bear. His eyes locked onto Dwayne, calculating, dangerous. Then, with a slow, deliberate motion, he pulled off his sunglasses and smirked. Well, The Rock, he rumbled. Didn't expect to run into you today. Dwayne squared his shoulders. Didn't expect to be here either. Bear's gaze flicked to Rick, then to Henry. So, what's the problem? Rick stepped forward, jabbing a finger toward Dwayne. This Hollywood pretty boy's been sticking his nose where it doesn't belong. Bear tilted his head, unimpressed. Rick continued, his voice rising. The old man spilled coffee on me. I asked him to pay. He refused. The Rock here thought he could just take his side. Even tried to buy me off. Bear looked back at Dwayne, raising an eyebrow. That true? Dwayne nodded. Mostly. Except the part where Rick here harassed and robbed a 74-year-old veteran. Bear's smirk faded. His gaze snapped to Rick. You did what? Rick swallowed hard. I was just trying to teach him a lesson, man. Bear took a slow step forward, towering over him. You stole from a veteran? His voice was calm, but there was something lethal beneath it. You humiliated him? Threatened him? Rick opened his mouth, but no words came out. And you called me and the boys down here for what? Bear continued, his tone sharpening. To jump a guy who protected this country? Dwayne and Henry watched as realization finally hit Rick. He had made a huge mistake. Bear exhaled through his nose, then turned to his crew. Mount up. The other bikers hesitated. You sure, Bear? One of them asked. Bear's jaw tightened. I said mount up. One by one, the gang climbed back onto their bikes. The engines revved, the tension shifting. Bear turned back to Henry, his voice lower now. You good, old man? Henry nodded cautiously. Bear glanced at Dwayne. You're lucky you stepped in. If I'd caught Rick pulling this crap before you did, things would have gone a whole lot worse for him. Then, without another word, he climbed onto his own bike. As the gang pulled away, Rick stood frozen, his face pale. He turned to Bear. Wait. What about me? Bear shot him a look of pure contempt. Figure it out. And with that, he was gone. Rick stood there, alone. Dwayne shook his head. Looks like you just lost all your backup. Rick's mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. Finally, he turned on his heel and disappeared into the trees. The confrontation was over. Dwayne turned to Henry. You okay? Henry let out a long breath. I think so. Dwayne smiled. Come on. Let's get you home. And as they walked away, Henry clutched his ring. A reminder that, even in the darkest moments, there were still people willing to stand up for what was right. An unlikely brotherhood, how the Rock and a biker gang defended a veteran. The tense standoff took an unexpected turn when Bear, the gang leader, stepped forward. His piercing gaze shifted from Dwayne to Rick, the biker who had started it all. You called us out here, over a spilled coffee? With a veteran? Bear's voice was low and menacing. Rick stammered, trying to justify himself, but Bear cut him off with a glare. Turning to Henry, he did something no one expected. Sir, on behalf of our gang, I want to apologize. The air shifted. What had felt like a battlefield was suddenly transformed into an unexpected moment of respect. Then Bear turned back to Rick. You've been a problem for too long. But this? Harassing a veteran? This crosses a line. Rick tried to laugh it off, but Bear wasn't having it. With one swift motion, he ripped the gang's vest off Rick's shoulders. You're out. Rick's bravado crumbled. He ranted, threatened, but no one cared. His gang had already turned their backs on him. Furious, he stormed off, revving his bike into the distance. The danger was over. Bear faced Henry once more. If there's anything we can do to make up for this, just ask. Still reeling from the rapid shift in events, Henry chuckled. It's like something out of a movie. Dwayne smirked. Speaking of, how about a picture? The bikers immediately agreed, and soon, Henry found himself at the center of a surreal group photo, a veteran, a Hollywood star, and a gang of leather-clad bikers, all grinning together. As the moment settled, Dwayne's phone rang, work was calling. He turned to Henry. Can I give you a ride home? Henry hesitated, then a mischievous glint flickered in his eyes. Actually, I think I'd like to ride with them." The bikers erupted in cheers. Bear personally helped Henry onto the back of his motorcycle, while another strapped his wheelchair securely. Dwayne laughed. "Just promise me you'll be careful." Henry grinned. "No promises." With a powerful rev of engines, the gang took off, escorting Henry home like an honored king. As the wind rushed past, Henry laughed, a deep, free laugh he hadn't felt in years. He thought of Clara, his late wife. "Oh, Clara," he whispered into the wind, "you wouldn't believe the day I've had." When they finally reached his house, neighbors peered from behind curtains, stunned. Bear helped Henry down and, before leaving, handed him a slip of paper. "Our numbers. If you ever need anything, you call." Henry, touched beyond words, nodded. "I will." As the bikers roared off into the distance, he wheeled himself inside, pausing at Clara's framed photo. Her smile, frozen in time, seemed warmer than ever. With a deep sigh, he applied his anti-inflammatory ointment, feeling the dull ache of his joints, but also a renewed energy for life. Because sometimes, the best adventures start with the simplest errands.